안녕하세요.
Hello and welcome.
Welcome everyone to this short introduction into Korean studies and Korea. We are excited that you are interested in learning more about Korean society and culture and that you gave us this opportunity to share a few stories about this fascinating country. Having picked this lecture, chances are that you probably already know a bit about Korea and Korean culture. Maybe you are a big K-pop fan or watched one or two good Korean dramas or movies. Or you've learned to love the spicy dishes that Korea is known for. Whatever it is, we are guessing that you are interested in learning more about this country and its culture. We are delighted to help you gain a deeper perspective into what kind of place and culture Korea is.
But even if you have no idea what exactly Korea is like, that's alright, because in this lecture we are going to start with the basics and work our way up from there. We hope that way, later on, you'll have a strong foundation from where you can take a deeper dive into whatever aspect of Korean culture most interests you.
In this lecture series, we are going to provide a general overview of Korea, the Korean people, and notable researchers in Korean studies. We are also going to cover Korean history and religion, the philosophy and literature of Korea, and Korean society and culture.
All of these topics and more are part of the academic discipline of Korean studies. As some of you might be thinking about choosing this major, we are going to take a closer look at the people in history who started this area of study and what it's all about. This is So-hee. So-hee and the family live in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, or South Korea. Seoul is a megacity in Northeast Asia with a population of 9.7 million people. So-hee's family, her culture and customs, her education, the books that she likes to read and the music she listens to, the history of her grandparents and their contemporaries, as well as the political and economic system that they live in, their language, culinary traditions, and even other popular culture found in modern-day Korea are all objects of research in Korean studies. This is Chol-soo. Like So-hee, he calls himself Korean. Chol-soo lives in Pyongyang, the capital of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known as North Korea. Since 1953, the Korean peninsula has been divided between the North and the South, partitioned along the 38th parallel. But where political ideology may create boundaries, the continuity is upheld through cultural tradition. Although it is patently more difficult to gather information about North Korea, Korean studies attempts to better understand and describe life in North Korea too. This is Minna. Minna's parents were born in the Republic of Korea before they immigrated to the United States 2 years before Minna was born. Although Minna was born in the US and has an American passport, she grew up in a Korean household and was surrounded by a Korean community, speaks Korean just as well as she does English, is familiar with Korean food and culture, and is considering studying abroad in South Korea, a country which so far she only traveled to by watching K-dramas. Her family and others like her that are a part of the Korean diaspora worldwide is another area of research in Korean studies. Korean studies belongs under the larger umbrella of area studies and is often included in the broader context of East Asian studies. Compared to China or Japan, Korea didn't attract much interest in the West until far into the 20th century. As a result, Korean studies didn't become established as a distinct, independent subject at universities until relatively recently, compared with its neighboring disciplines. Korean studies first started among Western missionaries. Its pioneers, including the Canadian James Scarth Gale, the Briton Richard Rudd, the Americans Homer Halbert and George Herbert Jones, and the German Andre Eckert, went as missionaries to Korea, where they learned the language and became accustomed to the Korean way of life. And in the process, they also became cultural middlemen. Their writings not only laid the foundation of what would become the academic discipline of Korean studies, but they also made contributions towards preserving the legacy and pride of Korea. For example, the German missionary Andre Eckert, who lived and worked in Korea during the Japanese occupation, documented in real time many aspects of the Korean culture that the Japanese tried to suppress and eliminate, creating an invaluable anthropological record. Until the middle of the 20th century, Korean studies remained a rarity at Western universities. However, interest quickly grew as South Korea rose to economic prominence in the 1970s. And not too long after, the Korean government established several centers and institutes with a focus on promoting research in Korean studies and fostering a greater appreciation for Korean culture heritage abroad. Like other area studies, Korean studies has shifted from an initial focus of mainly philologic and historical research to a much wider variety of other social-cultural issues, including society, politics, and even pop culture. Though there's much discussion over what exactly is Korean studies and what areas of study are included. In this lecture series, we'll introduce some of the major topics in Korean studies. We've just heard a bit on how the academic discipline of Korean studies came into being and what some of its main concerns are. But before we can learn about some of these things in detail, we should first introduce the place we are talking about. After all, we already heard that Korea and Koreans can mean different things. So let's take a closer look. Korea in the broader sense refers to the Korean peninsula at the eastern coast of the Asian continent and the close to 4,000 islands surrounding it, of which the largest is Jeju Island in the southwest of the Korea Strait. It is enclosed on three sides by water: the Yellow Sea in the west, the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan, in the east, the East China Sea in the south, and the Korea Strait in the southeast. The Korean peninsula has three powerful neighbors: China, its neighbor to the west, with whom it also shares a land border in the north, Russia, with a short land border in the northeast, and Japan in the east, separated by the East Sea and the Korea Strait. Korea itself is politically divided. As a result of the Korean War, the heavily fortified, demilitarized zone, a 250 kilometers long border along the 38th parallel north, splits the peninsula in two countries since the Korean Armistice Agreement in July 1953. The capital of the Republic of Korea is Seoul. The capital of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is Pyongyang. How's the climate? What kind of clothes should I bring if I plan to go on vacation to Korea?
Well, it depends when and where you want to go in Korea.
The climate of Korea is cold and sunny in winter and hot and humid in the summer. The winter in Seoul, in the northwest of Korea, is bitterly cold, with about a week or so of snow each year. In contrast, the temperature in Busan, the second largest city in the southeast, rarely falls below freezing. And in summer, the temperature there can reach well above 35 degrees Celsius. Upcountry cities like Daegu are similar, giving them the nickname of frying pan cities. South Korea is also affected by monsoons. The summer is by far the rainiest season. In the early autumn, Korea can be affected by typhoons, though Given Korea's location, these storms typically aren't as severe as they are in other neighboring countries.
You lived in Korea. So what would you say is the typical Korean landscape?
Mountainous. Very mountainous. Korea's landscape is characterized by a multitude of crisscrossing mountain ranges as well as many steep hills, which make a bicycle as an everyday means of transportation a rather ambitious choice. The highest peak in South Korea is the Hallasan on Jeju Island at 1,950 meters high. The two major mountain ranges are the Taebaek and the Sobaek ranges. Only about 30% of South Korea's total land area consists of lowlands, most of which lies along the west coast, and arable land accounts for only 22%. The longest rivers in South Korea are the Nakdeong, which passes through Daegu and Busan, and the Han River that passes through Seoul. Both of these rivers are longer than 500 kilometers. Now that we have a basic idea about Korean geography and climate, let's learn a bit about the people that live in Korea.
Korea isn't that large of a country. In the list of countries by area, it's ranked 107. But when ranked in terms of total population size, Korea is number 28. So, when you consider what we just learned, that the percentage of lowland area in Korea's landscape, where most people live, only accounts for around 30%, you can see that.
I see what you're getting at. It means that there's a lot of people all concentrated in a rather limited amount of space.
Yes, South Korea's population density is one of the highest in the world.
Now, while South Korea's active farming population has fallen over the last 50 years from around 50% of the population down to less than 5%, more than 80% of the population lives in cities, with a total population of more than 20,000 city dwellers, making Korea one of the most urbanized countries in the world. There are 9 cities with a population of more than 1 million in Korea, among which the 4 largest are the capital Seoul with close to 10 million, Busan with 3.7 million, as well as Incheon and Daegu, each with about 2.6 million residents. Over the years, South Korea has seen an unprecedented level of change in terms of both urbanization and industrialization. This has made Korea into an economic powerhouse, creating many new opportunities, but admittedly the results haven't been all good. Through this process, Seoul has continually been the strongest magnet for all of the best universities, schools and research institutes, and important political offices, organizations and corporate bodies in the country. This propelled Seoul into megacity status, reinforcing her as the primary cultural, political, economic and educational center of South Korea. Today, more than 25 million people, that's about half of South Korea's population, live in the Seoul capital area. This rapid population growth and urban concentration has led to several problems, including, but not limited to, the declining housing affordability, inadequate urban infrastructure and green space, unhealthy air quality and other effects of environmental degradation, and regional development disparities. So, are you curious how Koreans lived before the age of urban Korea? The traditional style of Korean houses that you still sometimes see is the hanok. It's a design that dates back to sometime during the Joseon dynasty in the 14th century. It's a building style with a number of unique features, which are, in fact, special adaptations that were designed with the Korean climate in mind. The most notable of these features is the ondol, which is an effective floor heating system. This style of heating system is still the most dominant type used in modern Korean homes. In post-war Korea, cities grew at a rapid pace. And with the lofty goals of aesthetics and city planning often not taken into account, modern Korean cities were redefined by rows and rows of high-rise buildings. For much of the last century, the traditional hanok was considered outdated relics of the past, not in line with modern progress. However, in recent years, this traditional style of architecture has seen something of a revitalization, and a number of hanok reconstructions sprouted up as restaurants, coffee houses, boutiques and other specialty shops, and vacation rental properties. Traditional Korean architecture is making a comeback, becoming something of a jewel in the modern Korean cityscape. Modern buildings sure have their convenience, but they look very similar everywhere in the world. Houses in the traditional style give the Korean cityscape a unique and memorable flair. Speaking about unique things, let's make a small jump here and talk about the Korean language and writing system. The Korean language is spoken by approximately 84 million people, of whom about 78 million are living on the Korean peninsula. Korean is also spoken by Korean people living in parts of China, Russia and Central Asia, and also in places like the US and Japan. Linguists classify Korean either as part of the Altaic language family or as a language isolate. Korean is often described as an agglutinative language, which means that different grammatical categories aren't expressed through transformational morphology, but by adjoining unchanging morphemes together. For example, unlike in English, where eat is transformed to ate to express past tense, in Korean, 먹다 changes to 먹었다. In this, the root word 먹, which means to eat, doesn't change. Rather, the affix ot is added to express that the action happened in the past. The typical word order for a Korean sentence is subject, object, verb. However, this order is flexible and the verb is the only required and immovable element. Instead of I ate a delicious apple, in Korean you'd say I, a delicious apple, ate. It is quite a big step from most European languages, but learners from Turkey, Japan or Mongolia will find many familiar concepts and structures from their own languages while learning Korean. People who come to Korea for the first time or watch a Korean drama might feel a bit confused by the presence of multiple unfamiliar writing systems in Korea. If you're from outside of East Asia and are unfamiliar with East Asian languages, you might even have difficulties to distinguish written Korean from Chinese or Japanese. Though influenced by these other writing systems, the Korean writing system is completely distinct from the other two systems of written word. Koreans didn't use their own writing system from the get-go. China had a significant influence on the whole of East Asia, including the Korean language. A large percentage of the Korean vocabulary aren't Chinese loanwords or words that were formed in Korea or Japan using Chinese characters. Chinese characters, which in Korean are called hanja, arrived on the Korean peninsula together with Buddhism during the 1st century BCE and remained in use until the end of the 19th century. During this period, the ability to communicate in literary Chinese was considered an attribute of belonging to a higher social class. However, most of the population, being of the lower social strata, were illiterate. The 15th century ruler King Sejong the Great created the Korean script named Hangul. In contrast to Chinese characters, Hangul is better suited for representing the Korean language, matching its specific characteristics, including the Korean sound system and agglutinative morphology. Unlike Chinese characters, Hangul is a sound-based script, which makes it considerably easier to learn. King Sejong's intention was to give the general public a way to express themselves in writing, but his project faced strong opposition. The nobility disapproved the idea of a common written language. They feared that a common script would strip them of their class and privileges. King Yonsangun even banned Hangul. However, despite all of this, the unique writing system never disappeared again, and by 1849 it had gained broad acceptance throughout Korea when it was adopted as part of Korea's national language and used in official documents. Subsequently, Hangul became increasingly ubiquitous, being used in all other kinds of text soon after. The significance that Koreans attach to Hangul isn't anything minor either. There is even a national holiday in South Korea celebrating its creation, the Hangul Day. So, how do we write Hangul anyway? Modern Hangul consists of 14 basic consonants and 10 basic vowels, as well as 27 complex letters that are formed through combining these basic letters to indicate special pronunciation. Unlike in Western alphabets, letters are not written side by side, but arranged in syllables of at least one consonant and one following vowel, sometimes followed by one or two more letters. The syllables are nowadays written from left to right in rows, leaving spaces between the words and using a punctuation that's similar to the punctuation used in Western languages. Let's look at an example. The word apple, sagwa, consists of two syllables. The first syllable, sa, we write with the two letters for s and a. The second syllable, gwa, with the three letters g, o, and a. There are rules for how the letters have to be placed in syllables that are not hard to learn. In more recent history, globalization and internationalization, among other things, have led to a flood of new loanwords entering the Korean language. A vast majority of them come from English, but a sizable chunk also come from other Western languages, including French, German, and Italian. As the Korean language spoken in North and South Korea continues to grow further apart, the prevalence of Western loanwords in South Korean represents a clear dividing line between the two. Is it hard to learn Korean? Well, the answer to this question really depends on you. But with that said, it's totally doable if you are willing to put in the effort. We've now reached the end of today's lesson.
In the next sessions, we will discuss the long, eventful, and ever-changing history of the Korean Peninsula. We hope that you enjoyed today's lesson and that you will join us again next time. 다음 시간에 만나요.
만나요.